The Biden administration expelled around 170,000 migrants in February and March. More Haitian migrants were expelled in that group than the entire last year of the Trump administration. And overall, the Biden administration's first 100 days on immigration mirror many of the Trump administration's anti-immigrant policies. That's according to our next guest, Jacobin's Branko Marcetic. And Branko joins us now to discuss. Great to see you.
Hey, great to be with you.
So just break down what the policies have been, where have they differed, and where have they been the same?
Yeah, so, it's not as if Biden has completely continued everything Trump has done. He got rid of the public charge rule for people who were trying to get green cards. He obviously reversed the Muslim ban as well, which was one of the big ticket kind of immigration restrictionist items that Trump put in. It was very controversial. He stopped construction on the border wall to some extent. He actually recently canceled some of that money that was diverted from the Pentagon for the construction, although that has been a little bit, it hasn't quite been as definitive as I think people would have liked, and we can go into that a little later. Those are some of the big things that he's done to reverse course from Trump, I would say. Obviously he reinstated DACA as well, and he's put in this immigration bill, which shows some promise, but, the devil's going to be in the details by the time that actually gets to passing, if that ever happens, especially with the filibuster in place. Now, where Biden has continued Trump policies, one is Title 42, which is this policy that was put in by Trump. At the time, it was condemned as incredibly racist, sort of the height of the white supremacy that was latent in the administration. And it was dreamt up by Stephen Miller, who wanted to use the COVID pandemic as an excuse to basically prevent people from coming in through the southern border. And Biden has continued that. I think his administration has found it a very convenient rule, even though there isn't much of a public health justification for it. At the end of the day, it does provide an easy way to just sort of shunt people out without having to go, through the process of asylum and that kind of thing. The other thing, the Remain in Mexico policy, it's officially been suspended. So in some ways, that is a reversal of a Trump policy. But I think it's important to realize that the fact that it's been suspended and they're not enrolling anyone else, combined with Title 42, that means that effectively that southern border is really closed to asylum claims. That they're letting in a few people, I think about around 30 families, maybe a week, I think it was, under humanitarian grounds. But fundamentally, that border is really closed to asylum. And, this is a really outrageous thing at the time, Trump's kind of war on asylum. And the fact that it's kind of just continued tacitly under the Biden administration, I think really should get a lot more outrage. I'm surprised that it hasn't yet. So we'll see how that goes going forward.
What have you made of their outreach to Northern Triangle countries? Vice President Kamala Harris has been kind of put in charge of the policy there, communicating with some of those leaders. And what I've seen is that the money that they're planning to put there is really about further securitizing those borders so that within those states they can just prevent people from coming, not really dealing with the root issues and causes of which we have a hand in, of course, that are causing people to flee those countries in large numbers. What do you make of the policy there so far?
Yeah, no, it's not good. It's exactly as what you described. This goes back in Biden's career. This is the approach that he's taken throughout his time in Washington. He did it with the Plan Colombia under Clinton. He did it under Obama when he was his vice president, particularly with the Biden billion toward the very end of Obama's term. And yeah, the MO basically is to incentivize some of these Central American countries to do border enforcement for the United States on their behalf, by both carrot and stick. In this case, Biden's using several carrots. He's got that aid that that is in that immigration bill. He's saying, if you take care of things, if you stop these people from coming to the border so I have to deal with them and get a lot of flack for it, then I will give you some aid. He's also, he had a phone call with the Mexican president, AMLO, and he, without saying it in so many words, essentially said, yes, we'll be willing to give you some of our vaccines On the other hand, what can you do for us at the border? Not unlike some of the kind of mafia-like stuff that Trump was accused of during his term. It's that's one part of it. It's incentivizing these countries to brutally crack down on migrants to stop them from coming to the U.S. border. The other half of it is this idea that kind of launching these free trade or free market style economic policies, these infrastructure projects, putting in pipelines and the like, that will create jobs and so therefore will incentivize people from making the trip to the U.S. In reality, what happens is people get their land dispossessed, or it in other ways disrupts their lives. They perhaps fall into poverty. And they end up making the trip anyway. A classic tale of this kind of supply side economics, essentially. So, I don't think that's going to be successful. It's been tried already numerous times before by Biden himself, and it's basically resulted in what we have now. And I don't see why it's going to be any different this time.
What did you make of the whole mess around his refugee policy? Of course, during the campaign, promised to lift the cap. Trump had set it at historic low of 15,000. Biden signs an executive order basically indicating he's going to do what he promised on the campaign trail. Then he doesn't take the extra step of signing the directive. It just sits on his desk for weeks and weeks that turned into months. People who had already been cleared, to come over as refugees, their status approved, their flights were canceled. He comes out and says, actually, I'm going to keep the 15,000 cap in place. There's a big public backlash. There's a lot of confused messaging, and ultimately they end up lifting the cap to 62,500. What do you read into just what a complete mess that was? And do you see something hopeful in that? There was public pressure and outrage, and it caused them to change the policy.
Yeah, I mean, look, part of it is this administration has been surprisingly disciplined, I think, especially after Trump, but especially given Biden's history. I mean, he has kind of kept a lid on some of his more his tendency to kind of mouth off and say the wrong thing at the wrong time when it comes to things like the stimulus bill and some of these other domestic programs. On immigration, on the other hand, we've sort of that's the area where we've seen some of the old Biden in place. So, for instance, the administration and Democrats, they don't want to call the border situation a crisis. Biden calls it a crisis. Jen Psaki says, no, the refugee limits has nothing to do with some of the stuff happening at the border with asylum claims, and then Biden in a speech links the two. We're seeing a little bit of that lack of discipline there. The other thing we're seeing, I think, is Biden has had this tendency throughout his career that he sort of gets very easily influenced in certain issues by the right. He sort of gets pushed into moving right on matters that he feels, I guess, are particularly hot button, cultural, social, or political issues. I think immigration is one of these issues. The deficit isn't as big of a concern in people's minds anymore, but immigration still is. And clearly it's one thing that he still fears some sort of backlash from. And one of the things that we know from the reporting in New York Times and the Washington Post is that Biden himself personally actually intervened, basically to roll back or to cancel this raise in the refugee cap. According to New York Times, Antony Blinken was pleading with him to raise the cap, and Biden essentially said something along the lines of, why are you bothering me with this? I don't really care about it. Of course, it ended up with this very embarrassing snafu. Whether I feel hopeful about it, I mean, on the one hand, yes, it is good that that such fierce backlash forced the administration to backtrack, and I think clearly that shows that if people were willing to criticize the administration on a whole host of other immigration issues he's doing, maybe they would do the same thing. However, I would also caution that while Biden has said he's going to increase the cap, he's increased it to 62,500 now. He says he's going to increase it to double that for next year. But he has also said, well, look, the damage that's been done means that we probably won't actually be able to meet those goals. So he's done this big ticket thing, this big headline grabbing thing where he has nominally reversed it, but in reality, whether he's actually going to reverse that is it's remains to be seen. It doesn't look like he will, to be honest.
Well, and so much effort and outrage just to get Biden back to his original position. Forget about pushing him any further to the left. I think you're right to point out, though, look, I mean, this guy throughout his career, he was a tough on crime, law and order guy, architecting the crime bill. He was a war on drugs guy. And it still seems like he very much has that ideological affinity and direction if you look at his policies. Branko, thank you so much for breaking this all down. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. More Rising for you after this.